Product systems operate as, let's say, a container for different or slightly different ways of making a set of components fit together. You might have an image associated with the system to generally represent what it looks like. Probably something a little closer would be more helpful in this case. We can also have different ways of configuring it. So that might be that this system is fully installed, fully fabricated and installed. You could have another configuration where you take out field installation labor, or you might just sell the material as stock material, not fabricated at all. There are different ways that you can configure these validations in order to price the materials differently. One of the more important reasons for having the product system is to organize the information that relates to how it is put together. So the frame dimensions, we have a typical face dimension and a depth dimension. If we have a look at this system, it has the same information here, depth and face. And if we turn it, let's see, we got a face dimension here and then a depth dimension here. We also have a glass bite, so horizontal and vertical, so we're about 5/16 horizontally and not quite 7/16 vertically. Our daylight size is 47 by 47. If we go ahead and save this, we'll see the relationship to the daylight size. So this is our glass, 47.69. That's the width, 0.31. Yeah. So 47.61. It's almost 4/10 less. That's almost 4/10. So the glass bite is added to the daylight size. It can be a positive or a negative value. We also have shim spaces. So in this case, the system has 3/8 of an inch all the way around. And we see that in the drawing. The opening size is given as 100 by 100. The frame size is modified by the shim spaces. It's reduced 3/4 of an inch because we have 3/8 at the left and the right. Same is true of the top and bottom. Our actual fixed frame size is 99 1/4. We can have deductions for receptors. So in the same way that the shim space deductions are operating, we can account for the thickness of a SILPAN receptor or JAM receptors or a head receptor, and further make deductions from the frame size. The sealant dimensions, we have interior height. Okay, it's a good practice a lot of times to caulk up the JAM on the interior. Where that practice is observed, you can record the interior height. Many systems have a 24-inch interior sealant height. Structural width, this refers to the structural sealant. Structural depth, that refers as well to the structural sealant. We'll pull up the drawings of the system so that I can explain that. Here we go. The structural sealant width is this horizontal dimension, the space between the glass and the fin of the frame. And the structural sealant depth is going to be that space in between the spacer tape and the top of the fin. Looks like this calls for 11/16. So it looks like we have only a 1/2 inch. Looks like it's a tad bit short. Let's see, maybe I'll have to tweak that before you look at the system. And then we finally have vinyl, add per foot. So as most of us in the glass business know, the vinyl material that runs around the perimeter of the frame, it's pictured here on the inside, that tends to shrink over time, and we want to cut that at a slightly larger size. So you would want to consult the manufacturer's instructions to see what the recommended amount to add might be. But the add per foot value is added typically to the daylight size, but it refers to basically this value when it's used. Now we'll also take a look at editing the system configuration, so we can find that structural sealant depth, okay, was 11/16, so we can save that. And we could also copy the system. If we want to copy the system, we'll have to give it a new name. So you'll notice that the quotation mark shows up a little bit funny. Maybe we want to make this, let's say, stock okay. Now that's a complete copy of the entire system. Okay, if we go back to the vendor, we'll find now we have 2 such systems, and the company, my company, I happen to be logged in under, has this system. It's private to my company. Nobody can see it. I can proceed to change it in any way that I want to change it, and it's entirely possible for me to reduce the shim spaces and what have you. If I wanted to create a copy of the same system and just sell it in a slightly different way, and I'm comfortable with all of these values, then a potentially better way of copying it is to select the validation and then copy this configuration. So we have to create a name. I like this name. And then we have to choose a system. I like this system. Okay, and if we go back to the system overview, we'll see that we now have 2 different systems here. We can edit this configuration. We can call it, whatever we want. Let's say stock material not installed. Go ahead and save that. Go back to the system overview, and now we see the distinction.